I love driving. That's why whenever I can drive my car, I will drive it. And I also love driving cars, but unfortunately, I don't have access to a big garage. That's why I sim race and love picking up road cars to free roam and chill. Because of that, games like Assetto Corsa still are in my rotation, and believe it or not, Gran Turismo 7. GT7 does the road cars really convincingly, but there's now a new car starting, which you've probably heard of, which is Assetto Corsa ACEvo. Now, this ACEvo thing seems to be directing itself to be some sort of Gran Turismo on the PC, with free roam coming in the future, so that means road cars are going to be a really important part of the experience. Gran Turismo 7 had just recently its 3rd birthday, while Assetto Corsa ACEvo still is on its first early access release. So I wanted to bring a comparison between both of these titles, but the comparison kinda changed as I started running more and more these titles side by side. Originally, the topic for this video was a little bit different. It was the differences between Assetto Corsa ACEvo and Gran Turismo 7 in regards of road cars, like these types of road cars. But the more I drive, or started driving in this, and comparing both of them, it made me question if the topic shouldn't be changed to, so what the hell makes a Simcade? Because we're driving here at the Lancia with the Evo 2. There's one in Gran Turismo 7, the Evo 1, but mostly the same car-ish. And even though this is considered a simulator, I find Gran Turismo 7 more difficult to drive. So I'm driving here. Obviously, I'm not a big drifter. We're picking up a really old car, 4-wheel drive and all of that. But the tires, more than the suspension even, the tires work in a completely different way. I am able to use the tires to my advantage, and if needed, you know, you can do stuff like this. You can change the movement of the car, the yaw of the car, into something completely different. You can basically go sideways in almost any given corner, and as long as you keep torque, you are able to steer the car out of it. What I mean by this is that it feels like the tires are alive. Not that they are easy or difficult, it's more like you have inherent control of it. It's more like you have inherent control of the tires. You understand what the tires are telling you. You can go past its package of grip, but that doesn't mean that the tires are easier or more difficult to drive per se. It means that you have more control between all the ranges of grip. The tire will still give out the grip if it can fall off, but it feels that the tire is alive. There's no on and off trigger for them. It feels like the drop-off is more progressive, and that's really not the case in Gran Turismo. So the first thing going into Gran Turismo that I got was how great this game looks. I know this is not the topic, but it looks really, really nicely, especially in an HDR, which is not able to be captured on the capture card, sadly. We're not here about the graphics, though. We're here about this car, and this is the reason why I changed a little bit of the pivot, or pivoted a little bit of this video's topic, which is, you know, driving the tires. As we are here with the Lancia 1, Evo 1, in Evo we have the Evo 2, which is a facelift with a little bit of hardware change, which doesn't make that much of a difference in driving the car. And we also have comfort medium tires, which are more or less the same as we have in Assetto Corsa ACEvo. So what I found is that the handling is completely different, and it's much more difficult to drive at speed in Gran Turismo in a like-for-like circumstance than it is on the respective sim racing titles with respective or comparable cars with the comparable tires. So in this case, we're more or less comparable with the ones in Evo, which are the ones we are actually comparing, the road tires, and it feels like this thing is just like understeer galore. In Assetto Corsa we have a neutral car with a little bit of oversteer, which you can exploit. You have an unbrake, you can exploit, and you can exploit the curve, the grip curve. This thing is on and off. So that got me thinking. So if that's the case, it's more difficult to drive, it's more difficult to understand. We also have a force feedback system that feels kind of laggy and not as precise. It does its thing, but it's really not as precise. It's not really that pickup of a force feedback that, for example, we have in Assetto Corsa, where you can just pick it up and drift it. You understand where the grip is. Here, it's completely dead, always. So you have a completely different skill set trying to drift in this than you do have in Assetto Corsa or even Evo. In the tires, no matter what it is, it has a situation where you understand where the grip is, and then you completely become oblivious to what it does. So driving this at speed, no matter what the tire is, becomes more difficult than it has in Assetto Corsa Evo. That's really the reason why I decided to change and pivot, because if it's more difficult to drive something like this, what is really the reason to call this a Simcade? It needs to be deeper than that. Then we have an example that I think it's a little bit closer between these two titles, which will be the Giulia with supercar tires. I still don't understand where the supercar tires are going to fit, but generally it is closer, I believe, to sports hards or sports mediums in Gran Turismo. Now, in this case specifically, what we see here is definitely more lateral grip. The tires are still able to be used by the rear of the car, because this car has a lot of torque, it has a lot of power, so you can still do crazy stuff with it, but it's going to be a little more difficult to control at the edge. So in this case, and as we move into later on into Gran Turismo 7, I think the papers here, or the roles here, I mean, they kind of invert between both of the sims. If in the Lancia, the Lancia was easier to use in Assetto Corsa Competizione or Assetto Corsa Evo, as we move into these types of tires, I think the roles kind of invert. It's not that it's difficult to control here with the Alpha, but as the super or sports cars go for the tires, they become a little different in Gran Turismo 7, even though they have lots of similarities. But the grip pickup, it then becomes more apparent in Gran Turismo 7, while in here you have, you know, the grip drop off. It's a little more progressive, a little more controlled. It feels like you have either more time to control the car or to see, you know, one of those slow-moving train crashes that you know that are going to appear. As we're going here, I'm doing a lot of yaw coming in to this. The movement is definitely more subtle. It happens, but it moves laterally a little bit slower, a little bit more with more compensation. And the car just goes around without being so abrupt. Coming in over here, exactly the same thing. You have this slide over here, you know, like I said, a slow-moving train wreck that you understand why it happened. You went to too much speed, you turned in with too much force. You know, all of this stuff is controlled, of course. You understand exactly why it is happening. There's really not a big snap of drop in and drop off of grip. So these tires over here feel in between a race tire and a, you know, not so much a race tire, but, you know, a semi-slick or thereabouts, and, you know, a road tire. There's a little bit of both. Lots of grip, but the loss of grip isn't really that sudden as sometimes it can happen in race tires. So what means going into Gran Turismo is that we're starting to see the opposite of what happened in the road tire. As we move to the Alpha and we move to this type of tire, which is the sports hard, should be comparable to the hypercar or supercar kind of tire, I suppose. There's more of a connection between Assetto Corsa Evo and Gran Turismo 7. As we go into T1, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. You know, that lift-off kind of feel when you're overspeeding into the corner and the car just can't be able to turn and then just turns in too much. This. So you have that. It feels a little bit different, but because it's a force feedback issue, in my opinion. And you have more similarities. But the similarities, as we go into speed, also go differently, because while there's I think more side grip between in this game in Gran Turismo 7, the drop off that we had on the other car or on the other tires in the Lancia also becomes super present here. And as you put more speed, it becomes really more important to understand there's going to be a huge drop off into your tires, so you need to start to drive it more about the tire awareness rather than just being in the flow that happens, for example, in Le Mans Ultimate or Assetto Corsa Competizione. So in that case, the on-off grip, it's more into the iRacing side than it is on everything else. Not saying it's the same as iRacing, it's just iRacing also has the situation of on-off grip, but this feels far more abrupt, which is kind of strange. So you have more sideways grip. You're doing this at what? Almost 200 kilometers an hour, and then the car goes with almost zero information. And once again, it becomes more difficult to have awareness of the tire. It becomes more difficult to have an understanding of what the tire is doing. An inherent understanding that is available in LMU, Assetto Corsa Evo, Assetto Corsa Competizione. That doesn't mean that those tires in those other games also don't have like a switch sometimes, but in Gran Turismo 7, it is definitely much more present. In driving these tires at speed requires a specific skill set of trying to figure out where the tire is in terms of grip, and you drive with that in mind. As you add more grip into this, it becomes more on the Mickey Mouse kind of area, where you have a lot of grip, and then you also have grip drop off, grip drop off, grip drop off. So it can't be just about how easy it is to drive a car to make a Simcade, at least not in all the tires. So I don't understand why just call this a Simcade based on difficulty, because this is, in my opinion, more difficult to drive, less instinctive to drive than what we have in Assetto Corsa Evo, what we have in LMU, what we have in Assetto Corsa, or even iRacing. You do require some sort of sixth sense for this to understand where the tires are. Maybe the simplification in certain aspects, like the tire only having like one area or two of each, or something like that. The simplification of certain aspects makes it Simcade, but really not the driving itself. But I want to know what you think of this. The bigger difference, I think, in control of in these tires will be then on the race tires, where there's a lot of Mickey Mouse stuff. There's a lot of sideways grip, but then again, the grip drop-off becomes really huge. So what makes then the difference between a Simcade and a full-fledged sim racing title, if not in physics or in the tires or whatever? What is for you the biggest difference, and what makes Gran Turismo not a sim racing title but a Simcade? Let me know in the comments below. Really huge. So what makes then the difference between a Simcade and a full-fledged sim racing title, if not in physics or in the tires or whatever? What is for you the biggest difference, and what makes Gran Turismo not a sim racing title but a Simcade? Let me know in the comments below.